I'm going to call into order the Concord City Council meeting of Monday, July 8th, 2024. Will you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Councillor Brown. Here. Mayor Champlin.
Here.
Councillor Fennessy.
Present.
Councillor Foote.
Present.
Councillor Grady Sexton.
Excused.
Councillor Horn.
Present.
Councillor Keach.
Here.
Councillor Kretovic.
Here.
Councillor Kurtz.
Here.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Excused.
Councillor McNamara.
Excused.
Councillor Schlosser.
Here.
Councillor Schultz, excuse me. Here. Councillor Sekou.
Present.
And Councillor Todd.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next order of business, the approval of meeting minutes. Unless somebody has an objection, I will hang these together and accept a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion or comments or changes on the minutes? These are the minutes for the May 30th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting, the June 3rd, 2024 Finance Committee meeting, the June 3rd, 2024 City Council meeting, and the June 10th, 2024 City Council meeting. Hearing no comments, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Now move to item number 7. Every year, one of the responsibilities of City Council, as outlined in the city charter, is to conduct the city manager's evaluation, annual review and evaluation. By virtue of the stipulations of the city charter, we are only able to rate the city manager's performance as either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Do I have a motion?
A motion to give the city manager a satisfactory evaluation for this year, or for
Second.
last year.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments, discussion? Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. My deep appreciation to the members of the council that joined us over several meetings to discuss the city manager's evaluation. I believe the mayor passed out a document for us that really outlined all the things that we talked about for his accomplishments. One of the things that really came to light is that collectively around this table, we see that across the state of New Hampshire, we likely have the very best city manager. And while it comes with a satisfactory rating, we really rate him as excellent. And we are so appreciative, Mr. City Manager, of all that you provide to us, and I'm very glad to have made this motion on your behalf.
Thank you, Councilor Kretovic. Any other comments? All right, seeing Councilor Todd.
I'm sorry, yeah, just quickly, I think that I agree with everything that Councilor Kretovic said, of course, and also just to point out that this sheet is very good, but I would note that there are some issues where if you really start to dig into it, there's actually even more savings. So when you look at sustainability and you look at the LED light conversion, for example, this talks about the savings that we'll have over 10 years of $700,000. But the fact is that the program was implemented in a timely fashion where we waited for grant opportunities to be able to implement it so that that conversion wouldn't come out of taxpayers' dollars. And other communities didn't do it that way. So there are other communities that spent $2 or $3 million or more on their conversions. They did them many years ago, but on the other hand, taxpayers had to pay up. So it's, I think that's just one example that's indicative of the kind of hidden savings, the overall savings that we get based on the city manager's oversight and performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? Councilor Kurtz.
Yes, I'd just like to say, as a new counselor who's only had a few months to work with our esteemed city manager, I've been deeply grateful for the access to city staff that he has allowed and the guidance that he's provided when I have approached him with questions. And he has definitely been integral, as have many around this table, in welcoming me to the council and helping me to find a way to participate effectively in city governance. So I'm deeply grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sekou.
I just want to second, as Councilor Kurtz said, you always made yourself available, you made your staff available. Whenever we have a question, you are there for us, so thank you.
Thank you. Let me say, as the new mayor, I had a deep appreciation for you in the 10 years I spent on city council, but the last 6 months working with you more closely has given me an even greater appreciation for your skills and your ability. All right, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I have it unanimously. The next action item is, in accordance with Section 21B of the city charter, our approval, our acceptance of the city manager's employment contract. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor, please signify. I'm sorry.
Motion? I'm sorry,
The motion is to accept the city manager's contract.
because it's interesting, it's not listed separately as an item on the,
It's city manager's evaluation and employment contract. an item
He has
seven.
been on contract, that's my understanding. Last council, you guys voted for him to be on contract, so technically, as you said, this is really accepting his evaluation.
Yeah.
Because he has been on contract.
Right.
We are not renewing any contract, that's my understanding.
We are modifying the pay level.
Yes, that's correct.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I,
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor.
I don't like interrupting this, you were
That's
you were
quite
in
all
voting
right.
mode.
It's quite all right.
Well, I just wanted to say as a footnote, a year ago, before I ever thought I would be serving on the city council, I remember hearing the salary range for this position and thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. I just wanted to add that as a footnote, that by focusing on evaluation of our current city manager, he has been phenomenal. So in that, of course, I agree, as a position at that rate, I still have some reservations, and I've heard from some constituents who share that view. That is just a separate footnote from my vote.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. We now move to the consent agenda. I'll note that nothing has been pulled from the consent agenda by any city councilor. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the consent calendar? All right, all those in favor of adopting the consent calendar as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? The ayes have it. Thank you. We will now move to the public hearing portion of our meeting. If there are no objections, I am going to hold one public hearing for items 24A, 24B, and 24C. All three of these deal with the reorganization of the Development Department. And I think just to facilitate things, we can have people come and testify on any portion of that they want during the public hearing. Is that okay with everyone? All right, fine. Madam Clerk.
The three items are as follows. First one is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V Administrative Code, Chapter 30 Administrative Code, Article 30-2, Municipal Department, Section 30-2-20, Community Development Department. Second item is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2, Class Specification Index. The third item is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 28, Zoning Ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Your members of the council asked Mr. Walsh, Deputy City Manager for Community Development, to come forward.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. So you have a pretty comprehensive staff report that was provided for those three items that the clerk just read. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what this actually is. And I'm going to do this a little bit backwards from how it's in the staff report itself. So first, we're going to be terminating the former community development specialist position, which is an administrative position that's been vacant since May of 2023, and provided admin support to the administration division of the community development department. That's my division. We're going to be creating a new position called administrative coordinator, which is going to be a shared position between the community development department, administration division, the human resources department, and the city manager's office. And essentially the way it's going to work is the position is going to be a 60-40 split. with community development 60% of the time, 40% with HR, and it's going to provide as-needed support to the city manager's office when it's needed. So it's 24 hours a week in community development, 16 in HR, generally speaking. It's been vacant for a year. It was held open intentionally for a reorg that was achieved last spring, where we created the Assistant Community Development Director position, as well as the Director of Strategic Special Projects and Strategic Initiatives. We wanted to have some time to figure out what the admin support was going to be for the division, and after reflecting on this for the last year, we've concluded that we do not need a full-time admin position there. Myself and the two other folks who are there are relatively self-sufficient. At the same time, the Human Resources Department has no administrative support and is desperately in need of additional staff. So we thought trying an experiment where we're going to share staff across departments would be not only advantageous for our administrative needs, but hopefully beneficial for the taxpayers as well, and not duplicating positions. So essentially, it's going to be interdepartmental sharing of resources of the benefits. We also think that in the long term, once this position is filled, it could help with future succession planning in the HR department or potentially the city manager's office. Secondly, we're going to be reorganizing how we administer and enforce the zoning ordinance. This is going to be, the reorg essentially carries out the goals that were set forth in the 2025, FY 2025 Community Development Department budget, and we are going to be transferring zoning administration and enforcement from the Code Administration Division of the Community Development Department to the Community Planning Division of the department. Essentially, when this gets done, there's an org chart that's provided with your staff report that kind of lays out how that will be done. But essentially, the current zoning administrator position, which has been vacant since April, will go away, and it's going to become an assistant city planner for zoning. We already have an assistant city planner that will be reclassified into assistant city planner for planning, and that's how that will be carried out. At the same time, we'll also be bringing over the code inspector, and that position will be matriculating to planning and zoning inspector as part of this reorg when it moves to planning. We think it's beneficial for the organization, the public, and the development community. First and foremost, by doing this, we're going to be centralizing the preparation, interpretation, administration, and enforcement of the zoning ordinance in a single office. And so having that all in one place makes life a lot easier for interpretations and making sure that things are applied appropriately. So you get a better, more comprehensive customer service, not only for the development community who comes through our permitting process, but the public as well. And it makes it easier on the staff, frankly, as well. We're going to be centralizing key components of the development permitting process, i.e. the zoning board and planning board will now be staffed by the same office, which we think is more efficient, and it's beneficial as well, given how, if you look at our regulatory scheme, our site plan and subdivision regulations, which are administered by the planning division currently, are very interwoven and interconnected with the zoning ordinance. So again, by having this all in one place, we think it's a lot easier for everybody and beneficial, more efficient. It gives us more resources to ensure long-term compliance with planning board site plan approval by bringing that inspector position over. They'll be helping us deal with planning board site plan issues that come up long after a certificate of occupancy has been issued. We think we're going to retain more institutional knowledge by doing this. So right now we're kind of at the mercy of when we lose a zoning administrator, that institutional knowledge goes with them when they leave. And we think by having them on the team with the planning staff, we think there's a better chance of retaining that institutional knowledge, which is important when administering the zoning ordinance. It creates better succession planning for code. It's very challenging to find a code administrator who's familiar with building code, who's familiar with health code, who's familiar with housing code, property maintenance code, but also understands zoning. Planning staff, by definition, when they go to planning school, get a lot of schooling about zoning, and whereby in the code world, people kind of pick it up throughout their career. So we think it's a better fit that way. And when it comes time to replace the current code administrator, which I hope he never leaves, we think it's going to make it easier to do that process. And lastly, it also provides more resources to the planning division as we get prepared to undertake an upcoming master plan update, which is tentatively scheduled in the fiscal 26 capital improvement program, and also importantly, the anticipated regulatory amendments that will flow from that after we complete the master plan, which is critical for the community. In order to implement the zoning, all of these things, there's the 3 ordinances that the clerk mentioned tonight. So we're amending ordinance 30-2-20, which is the ordinance which establishes the Community Development Department and lays out the duties and responsibilities of each division. So we're amending things related to code and planning. We're also updating that to properly codify the reorg that was done a year ago when you created the Assistant Community Development Director position and the Director of Special Projects and Strategic Initiatives. Ordinance 35-2 Schedule D, which is going to make modifications to which positions we're no longer going to have and the new positions that we're creating as part of this reorganization. Chapter 28 of the Code of Ordinances, which is our zoning ordinance. So right now, if you look through the zoning ordinance, there's a lot of reference to the code administrator as being the administrator of the zoning ordinance. And because that is going to change and become the city planner, we are changing the zoning ordinance to make the person responsible for those determinations to be the deputy city manager for development, which is me, or their designee, which will be the city planner once that position is filled and we get up to staff. So it's really been done that way, similar to how we handle other ordinances that reference the city manager or his designee. Just we think it's easier for long-term administration of the ordinance. Last but not least, there is a reference in here that we are also changing staffing of the city's tree committee, which is a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. That's going to be going over to the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Special Projects, who's Beth Fenstermacher. It's right now it's a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission, but really when you look at that program, it's focused on trees in urban areas which are related to sustainability, so it makes more sense for that to live in Ms. Fenstermacher's wheelhouse. We'll have some conversations with the Conservation Commission about maybe changing the tree committee to a standalone city committee rather than a subcommittee of CONCOM, but we'll cross that bridge at a future date. And that is my remarks, Mr. Mayor, so happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Take a breath, please. Sorry. Any questions for Mr. Walsh?
If I could answer.
I'm sorry.
Just
City Manager.
briefly. And of course, one of the first questions I'm sure will be, what is this going to cost us? And the answer is no more than it currently costs. There is no additional cost associated with all these changes. We think this better aligns us for the next 10 to 15 years with the demands that are coming upon the department and the community, but all for the same cost that you've already budgeted in the past.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
Thank you. I do want to say that I think you've hit on a lot of great points. I think the succession planning piece is important and retaining that institutional knowledge. I just had a question about the tree subcommittee. Right now, folks who want to be on the tree committee submit a letter of interest, resume to the Conservation Commission, and they review it. How do you see that changing?
For the time being, it's still a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. I think once we have those conversations with them about if CONCOM is comfortable with it becoming a standalone committee separate from them, we would change the process, but for now, it's still a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission.
Follow-up?
I think that's excellent, because I think recognizing the trees as a piece of sustainability is so important. So thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you. Any other, Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. I think a lot of this makes a lot of sense to consolidate and sort of make it easier for planning and zoning to kind of be housed in one place. I'm wondering, from a customer service perspective, what are residents going to see? How is it going to change their interactions with zoning and planning when they come in for something?
So it's going to be one location. So they'll be coming to the 3rd floor of City Hall, which is where the planning office is currently located and will remain there. And it gives them the opportunity to walk in. It's rare for somebody just to have a simple zoning question. There's usually, sometimes it's only one variance that's needed, or one special exception, or one equitable waiver. But I think it gives the opportunity for the staff that will be handling zoning to directly collaborate with the other planning staff to say, wait a minute, they're coming in here and they want talk about a variance for parking standards for a particular development project if it's a larger project, because right now all the parking standards are in the zoning ordinance. But it might lead to other conversations of, well, gee, it's not just about they want to build less parking, but they also want to change certain dimensional standards, which are also in the zoning ordinance. And I think it will allow for more going back and forth to make sure that when some of these projects that might not only be just going to the zoning board, but ultimately have to go to the planning board, get a better initial review by all the staff who's going to live with it from the very initial consultation when that person comes to the counter, all the way through to the other end where they're going to be issuing a CO probably a couple of years later. CO is a certificate of occupancy, which all development projects get. So I think you're going to get better collaboration, better review of applications, less things that might get missed of, oh, gee, we know you came in for four different things you need from the zoning board, but there's actually 2 that we forgot to tell you about because you're going to go on to the planning board process, and you thought you could waive it through the site plan regs, and you can't because it's zoning. So I think you'll get a better customer service in that regard, and hopefully less frustration all the way around in the process.
Any other questions? Councilor Kerr.
Yes, thank you for the thorough report and the organizational chart, which I find very helpful. I'm looking at that right now, and I just have a question. Some of the positions are marked vacant, others are not, and do we have a city planner?
We have an acting city planner.
Okay.
And depending on what the city council does this evening, we are prepared to start advertising positions, I think, tomorrow with the HR department.
Okay, thank you. I just was checking if I had missed.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, just a follow-up on Councilor Kurt's question. So the city manager, you had said that this will cost us nothing. With those positions being filled, is that still the case?
That's the case.
Thank you.
Councilor Sekou.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you again. As I second what everybody said for a great and detailed description on those positions. My question is really about the administrator coordinator, because I don't know if the city have done it before where they shared 60 and 70. I'm looking at balance here, capacity, training, all those that comes to play in a department. What is the plan? Because of course you said 24 hours into development and then 16 hours into HR, but I think it's a great idea and it's going to be a great development for whoever get this position to get those knowledge, but for his or her sake, balance, training, and capacity.
Yep, I think it's a great opportunity for the right candidate, and the HR department will go through their training, and that person will learn everything about benefits administration, bringing up people on board, personnel action forms, all the stuff the HR department does, all the various policies that they have. In my particular shop, the person that's going to be helping us is going to be supporting various committees that my particular division staffs. So it will be supporting Mr. Thompson with the Airport Advisory Committee and the Parking Committee and the 3 TIF District Advisory Boards and the Community Development Advisory Council, and doing agenda packets and minutes and all the follow-up and posting that needs to be done. For those things, we'll be working with Ms. Fenstermacher on the Energy and Environment Committee and helping support those sorts of things that she works on. It will be helping us with preparation of the annual budget. It will be helping us with purchase orders, buying things, doing payroll, all this normal administrative things, which helping us with our website updates, which is critical, especially as Mr. Thompson starts working on our revamped economic development website and marketing through that tool and getting our story out there, which is a great story to tell. So it's going to be doing all those sorts of things. But candidly, we kept this position vacant over the last year, and we did those things ourselves so we could have a good understanding of what we need to train this person on when they arrive here, hopefully in the next couple months.
Any other questions? Councilor
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I want to add to the chorus, Mr. Welch, thank you very much for an excellent report and all the information. Appreciate it. It makes it very easy to understand what's happening. My question is similar to what my colleague asked a moment ago, which is related to the city planner position in this case. Are we comfortable that this new position will be manageable by one city planner, including when we look ahead to wanting to focus on the master plan and so forth?
Yeah, I think it is doable. I think the 2 assistant city planners are going to be critical. The assistant city planner for planning is going to be managing Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and everything that goes along with those 2, which is a big lift. And then on the other side of the house, you're going to have the assistant city planner for zoning that's going to be managing the zoning board, but it will also be working on planning board projects. And there's also still the senior planner. I think if we get the right team in there, we can do that. And once that team gets up to speed, it would give whoever the new city planner is going to be, I think, enough room to be able to pivot once those folks are trained over the next year, assuming we can get the positions filled quickly, which we would like to start pivoting towards, okay, let's move into our master plan update in fiscal 26 and everything that goes along with that. So I think it's doable, but we're going to have to make sure we get the right people in there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I'll now open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to testify on items 24A, 24B, or 24C? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Welcome. Please identify yourself.
Dan Williams, Concord. Given the reorganization of planning and zoning and the community development department, what is your position on the school board's middle school project, and when will you make public minutes of recent meetings between Mr. Walsh and Superintendent Murphy?
I'm sorry, that's not really a germane question, sir, and not the forum for it. Do you want to testify on these specific items?
Well, now that you are going to have some say over the middle school project, I was just wondering if you had an opinion of the project.
I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand your line of reasoning. Would you like to speak to one of these items, either item 24A, 24B, or 24C?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on items 24A, 24B, or 24C? All right, seeing none, public hearing is closed. We'll now move forward. If there's no objection by City Council, I'd like to hold one public hearing on items 24D and 24E, which both pertain to the same business.
So moved.
I don't need a motion, but thank you. Is everyone copacetic
I'm in the
with
role.
that? All right, Madam Clerk.
Excuse me. The first item is a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $25,000, appropriating the sum of $25,000 to conduct a planning and feasibility study concerning a potentially new shared facility for 603 Legal Aid, the Disability Rights Center, New Hampshire, and New Hampshire Legal Assistance, and accepting the sum of $25,000 in community development block grant funds for this purpose. Second item is a resolution adopting the anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support the Community Justice Center's site analysis of potential buildings and/or land for development and acquire preliminary architectural and engineering design costs estimates.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Again, members of the council, I'd ask the Assistant Director of Community Development, Thompson, to come forward and present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just as I've mentioned back in September or in October when I was talking about community development block grants, there is a specific procedure I have to go through, so bear with me as I read the process to make sure that we're compliant with federal law. First of all, there is an informational document in the back of the room for anybody in the audience that is interested in examining this. For the first public hearing regarding the proposal for the $25,000 planning grant, community development block grant funds are available to municipalities in New Hampshire through the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. Up to $500,000 annually is available for economic development projects, up to $500,000 for public facility projects, up to $500,000 for housing projects, and up to $500,000 for emergency activities. Up to $25,000 is available per planning study grant, and all projects under the Community Development Block Grant Program must directly benefit a majority of low and moderate income persons. The proposal before you tonight is a proposed application for Community Development Finance Authority for $25,000 in CDBG planning study funds. Of the grant funds, up to $3,500 would be retained by the city for administrative costs associated with the grant project, and up to $21,500 of the funds would be sub-granted to the New Hampshire Legal Assistance Association for a project with 603 Legal Aid and the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire. These are New Hampshire's 3 civil legal service nonprofit law firms serving low-income households, people with disabilities, and older adults. These 3 statewide agencies are considering headquartering in a single location to better coordinate and complement the services that they offer. The CDBG planning study funds would be used to finance an architectural and engineering study to look at various potential properties and determine renovation costs. In addition, the study would examine the potential for a new building and the construction costs of that option. Questions on this portion?
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Councilor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Does this qualify as this qualifies as a government use property?
They would be a nonprofit. There are specific laws associated with nonprofit agencies in terms of their ability to be taxed for property taxes. They have to go through a process with both the state and the local assessor, and it's an annual application they'd have to make in order to maintain a tax-exempt status if they were to pursue that.
Follow-up?
Because it's New Hampshire legal assistance, I know that there are some properties that are considered government use, and they do not have, it's a non-binding. They go to the planning board, there are recommendations made, but it's non-binding. Is this one of those cases?
This is not something that would qualify under that governmental land use statute, which is RSA 674-54. That is specific to governmental uses of property. This would not qualify as a governmental use of property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? No. All right. Mr. Thompson, no, that's fine. I'm good.
Where to go?
So
I do have a question for the city manager when you're finished.
The second portion of this is the anti-displacement relocation policy. This plan outlines measures under the Uniform Relocation Act as required for all CDBG projects that involve any displacement or relocation of persons or businesses. If the city were to undertake a CDBG project involved where displacement or relocation, they would have to follow this plan. This plan was adopted by the city, I believe, back in January of 2022 and is still valid for another year. The plan outlines those measures that would have to take to find comparable suitable housing for persons or businesses that are displaced or relocated. There is no displacement or relocation anticipated because this is a planning study.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson on item 24E? Thank you, sir. Mr. City Manager, do we know, these are all 3 of these are fine nonprofit organizations. Do we know whether they're currently renting their office space in Concord?
I believe all are leasing space.
Leasing space, probably from property tax paying.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Owners. Thank you. I know that Mr. Thompson mentioned in response to Councilor Brown's question that they would be tax exempt organizations. Does that mean that we had the potential here for either a piece of property or a building, which is also a piece of property, being taken off the tax rolls as part of their consolidation?
Well, I believe if as part of the outcome of this was to either build or acquire a piece of property that is now taxable by this coalition, so to speak, then that could take place. But I think that's something you'd need to take a look at the time if this was to go to the next phase, because as I mentioned during my budget presentation, we are the leaders in the state in terms of tax exempt property, and every dollar matters to the taxpayer. So I think it's something the city council should take a really hard look at if the time comes. That may not be the solution. They could come up with a solution where they end up continuing leasing space together and have that synergy of working together in a space like that, or it could be construction or acquisition of property. So it's something that is to be determined.
Okay. Would it be appropriate at that time and if it was appropriate, to discuss a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot.
Certainly.
With these.
If that was the case, certainly.
All right, thank you.
And I would think if these agencies realize how much great service they get from the city of Concord and the community in general, and they'd probably be, I would think they'd be interested in having that discussion.
Super, thank you so much. I'll now open the public hearing, or rather, if there's anyone who wants to testify. Mr. Schweiker. Good evening.
Good evening, mayors, members of city council, city manager, city clerk. I'm Roy Schweiker, and I have two general objections to this particular thing. Number one, these organizations serve clients statewide, and I would like to see if we can't keep the grants from Concord to be things that service Concord specifically, and let somebody like this apply for a county grant or a state grant, because they're serving a wider area, and we should concentrate on things, that are more, germane just to Concord. And the second thing is, I think that, and I said this a couple months ago when we had another one of these hearings, we need to try and help out the taxpayers, help out our people with these $500,000 grants. Like, I would hope that you would tell them that they're not going to get a $500,000 grant for actually building this thing, that we're going to take those grants, we're going to find things that will maybe help out the taxpayers, maybe put something toward the sewage or the athletic fields or something that otherwise would be paid by tax dollars, and use them for that. And I think that the second issue I have is, I would say if you ask the residents of the city if we have enough lawyers in the city, half of them would say we have enough lawyers, half of them would say we have too many. Whereas if you ask what don't we have enough of, they'd say it's housing. So we need to start concentrating on finding some organizations interested in housing to give some of these grants to. And if the current community development department can't do it, maybe we need to get some different people there who can find some of this stuff. And in particular, we need some cheaper housing. I read in the paper that there's a local nonprofit now that's apparently building some one-bedroom apartments for $300,000 each. And if you build something for $300,000, that essentially means you've got to rent it for $3,000 a month, to cover the cost. And I don't know how many people want to pay $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. I don't know why taxpayers would want to essentially subsidize that amount. We need to start getting some cheaper facilities, and that's why I'm suggesting that we should get some grants to plan some of these facilities. I was very disappointed at the last city council meeting. The city council unanimously rejected the idea of we could build some 380 square foot pods for people to live in. And I've twice rented an apartment of that size. And it's small. You don't have a lot of space, but it was big enough for me at the time. But, we don't have anything like that we're thinking of in the city. And the particular project, I think, was, for a profit-making business. And if they thought they could make a profit out of it, we certainly ought to be able to find a nonprofit that could, build some of these inexpensive things that you could, get housing for more people that maybe they actually afford to pay for themselves. Or certainly it'd be easier to find grants to pay for them. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, I said this before, we really need a official campground in the city. If we had a campground, we could eliminate all the homeless camps, because we could tell them, there's a place you can go stay. You don't have to camp elsewhere. And it is not illegal to be homeless, but it's illegal to trespass, it's illegal to litter. We could clean up the whole homeless camp problem if we had a campground. And two benefits of this campground is, number one, at a campground you have to register. So we would know if we had wanted felons living in the city instead of having them live out in the woods and murder passing hikers. The second thing is, you could ask them to pay to stay in a campground. I mean, it could obviously be a sliding scale, but someone that's making $1,500 a month in disability checks and gets free food, free medical care, free cell phone, they can afford to pay $15 a night for a campsite. And we need to start making homeless people a little bit responsible for their own lives, let them pay what they can afford. And some that may be zero, but we need to eliminate the idea, well, I'll live in the woods for free so I can spend all my money on drugs. That means you're asking the taxpayers to enable drug abuse. That's not
Point of
how I
order,
want my
Your Honor.
tax dollars spent.
Is this germane any more so than the
I'll-
last
I'll-
speaker?
I'll let Mr.
Okay,
Schweiker finish.
I mean, you're half right, but I'm trying to explain, I think it's very important to start emphasizing, let's get some planning grants for things that the city really needs. And let's get some $500,000 grants for things the city really needs. And I'm trying to explain two of the things that the city might work on getting grants for, as opposed to, we have plenty of office space in this city. I don't see that as a thing we need to try and plan more of. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweiker. Any questions for Mr. Schweiker? Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on items 24D and 24E? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Madam City Clerk, item 24F.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 28, Article 28-2-4, Allowable Principal and Accessory Uses in Zoning Districts, Article 28.5, Supplemental Standards and Glossary.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Members of the council, I'd ask Mr. Thompson to come forward and discuss his reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In your packet, you'll find a report dated May 16th, as well as a copy of the report that I prepared for the planning board in April. You may recall that I was before you back in February to introduce an interim zoning ordinance amendment to deal with the issue of charitable gaming facilities. The council then posted that public hearing for July 8th here tonight, and then referred it to the planning board for their recommendation. The planning board held a public hearing of their own on May 15th. Following public testimony, they unanimously recommended a modified ordinance based on what you had originally seen in February to be adopted to address the issue and moving forward. Essentially, what we're looking to do is to develop an interim standard where the city would allow accessory use charitable gaming associated with those charities and religious facilities that are located in 5 different zoning districts across the city, but we would not allow for principal use of a casino or a gaming facility under the terms of this revised zoning ordinance. This would allow us to then look at this issue in a more comprehensive fashion as we look at the master plan that we currently have for fiscal year 26. The idea here and the modification that we have made was, when I had originally presented this, there was a limitation of 4 events per year. After some consultation with staff at the Lottery Commission and consultation with our with examining the state law associated with charitable gaming, was suggested, and the planning board agreed that it should be similar to the statute, which requires up to 10 events per year per charity. So the ordinance has been updated to reflect that state law language. So this would allow, as an accessory use in these 5 different zoning districts, charitable organization to hold up to 10 events per year. Welcome to answer any questions, but I think, again, the other important thing to remember about this is this does not have an impact on those current primary use facilities, the Concord Casino on North Main Street and the proposed Break-A-Day Drive facility. Both of those, because they had received approvals and were existing prior to the posting of this ordinance, would become non-conforming uses, meaning they would not be able to deviate from what their current approvals state, but they would be allowed to continue. Again, given Concord Casinos, that would have to have a different operator, obviously, under the situation that they have with the Lottery Commission, but otherwise, those 2 facilities would be allowed to continue as non-conforming uses.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do we have any other permitted principal or accessory uses where we limit the duration of a property owner?
Not that I'm aware of, but there is not anything like this in state law that has this type of language specifying that it's a limit of 10 per year under the state law. So we're basically mimicking what the state law allows for under the statute based on the recommendation I get from legal, not from legal, but from the Lottery Commission in terms of their interpretation of how the state law would apply to local municipality regulation.
Okay.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Could you explain principal use and accessory? What size principal use? Could you have a small principal use, like a small restaurant, but a much larger gaming facility?
Generally speaking, an accessory use is subordinate to a principal use on a property. So a principal use, for example, using the facility on North Main Street, the principal use there is the restaurant and bar. The accessory use is the casino because it would be subordinate to, excuse me, the principal use on the property. Generally speaking, that means its size is smaller than the square footage of the principal use, at least in terms of interpretation of zoning that I've seen throughout my career. But ultimately, the principal use under this particular ordinance amendment would be that charitable facility or religious facility. They would be the primary use. Most of those already have either a church hall or a gathering place already on their location, so that would be the subordinate accessory use allowed on these 10 times per year.
Thank you. Councilor Horn.
For Concord Casino, if the current user isn't able to sell it like he's supposed to, does that non-conforming expire, or is that
Statutorily, and I believe under our ordinance, it would the use would have to be abandoned, willingly abandoned for more than a year in order to lose its non-conforming status under state law. So because there's the situation with the license, there's an active process going on to replace that. The use can't be considered abandoned by the city at this point. It would have to be completely abandoned in a statutory fashion in order to lose its non-conforming status.
Okay.
Councilor Curtis, did you have a question?
I did, thank you. Please help correct my memory. The original proposal that you brought to us was 4 events per year at any location?
Per location.
Per location, and this is now under action, it's 10 events per year per charity, so theoretically, any single location could work with multiple nonprofits and
Correct.
have many events.
Yes, but each individual organization would be limited to 10 per the statute, and each location ultimately, the intent was that each location would be limited to 10. Is there a way potentially around that by having them hosted at other places? Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
There's a question here.
Councilor Fenton.
Yeah, thank you. This is a follow-up to Councilor Kurtz's question. So if I'm understanding correctly, the amended version of the ordinance allows you 10 days a year per location.
The new language in the zoning ordinance will be a direct reference to the state law. The state law allows each charitable organization up to 10 events per year.
So that wouldn't be a limitation to 10 days per year per location, correct?
That would not, it's not necessarily limiting to that, no. If there's another location that has a charitable organization located on it, they could potentially have more than 10 if it's hosted by that particular location.
Well, what if there is a location that decides that it wants to host 10 different charitable organizations for 10 days a year? Would that be permitted under the proposal that we have before us?
The way I understand the state law, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Thompson? Councilor Brown.
Could you explain, because I looked at the map and I looked at the different zones, and it looks like a significant chunk of Concord when you look at all these different, these 6 different zones. Could you, speak to why those zones were chosen?
The reason those zones were chosen is that's where the city's charitable and religious organizations are located. The research that I did in preparing the ordinance was to examine, looking through our land use data, where churches, religious facilities, charitable organizations, in what zones were they located in, and these 5 districts were where those organizations exist today.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify on item 24? Mr. Schweiker.
Hello again, everybody. I am very upset about this change they've essentially snuck in of going from 10 days a year per location to 10 days a year per charity. Because essentially you're saying they can do right what he's doing now with the Concord Casino, is get 36 charities, each of them to come in for 10 days. So I think that you need to amend it back, say this is a thing that's regulating a location and not a charity. That we don't want a location in the city to have a charitable gaming every night. We only want it to be 10 days per year. And if, for instance, there's a Catholic facility and the Knights of Columbus want 3 days and the church want 3 days and somebody else wants 4 days, that's fine, but they can't independently all come in and get 10 days. So I think it's really important for you folks to say, we don't like the way it is, we're going to change it back to 10 days per year per location. Because this is a zoning law. This is regulating the use of a building. It's not a, law regulating charities. And so you don't have to abide by the state law allowing charities. You can forbid casinos entirely if you want to. So I think that the 10 days per year per location is the way to do it. I think that you'll find that the city in general is in favor of this. They didn't want in-person sports betting. They didn't want the Beano or whatever. They don't want the city to be Las Vegas. So I think you need to go back to the way it was originally intended. And the other thing is, there's a lot of people in the city that are not both professional architects and engineers who can look at a study in 5 minutes and decide whether it's appropriate or not. So as part of this same discussion, we need to change the zoning board and the planning board to say that all the materials to be reviewed have got to be available 10 days before the meeting when the meeting is posted. Because the public that gets to comment on those has got to have time to look at them. Or they've got to have time to employ an engineer if they want to look at it. You can't allow somebody to just walk in with some fat study and say, oh, here's the study I wanted approved tonight. Because the purpose of having a public hearing is to let the public comment realistically on what's there. So I think you need to change both the zoning and the planning board that all the stuff's got to be in 10 days in advance. If it's not in 10 days in advance, you will, let them talk, but recess the hearing till the next month so the public has their 10 days to study all the stuff they bring in. Then we wouldn't have the casino problem at all if they do something reasonable like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweiker. Any questions for Mr. Schweiker? Thank you, Mr. Schweiker. Oh, Mr. Thompson?
Your Honor, members of the council, I apologize. I was confusing my state law research with the actual ordinance language I wrote. The actual language I wrote says that the accessory casino or gaming facility shall be temporary. The maximum cumulative number of days at each property shall not exceed the days allowed, which is the 10. So it is 10 at each property.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like when you put
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to testify? Mr. Winnett? Welcome. Please identify yourself.
Yeah, my name is Steve, Steve Winnett, Ward 5 resident. There's some things that I don't understand about this, and I have to say it sounds like the potential for a lot of gambling, which, as Mr. Schweiker noted, there's been a lot of people who have expressed themselves that they don't want it, and I'm one of those people. So I took a look at the definitions of where the gambling could take place, and it seems like there are large tracts of streets, locations, and zone locations where there could be gaming places. So my first question is, are there specific places that that gaming can take place, charitable gaming can take place, or can any storefront, any owner of a non-residential property host a gaming 10 gaming events per year. Is there an answer to that?
You testified, it's not a question. and
Oh,
answer.
I can't get a question
You
answered?
can testify, yeah.
You testify.
Okay, so if any place in the zones that are defined for gaming can declare itself a gaming facility, there are a lot of places that gaming could take place. And still noting that it sounds like one place can only host 10 games, 10 gaming events per year, there could be a lot of gaming in this city. And I think that there hasn't been enough discussion with the public about this. I'll note that this is July 8th. It's the day after the 4th of July holiday. Not a lot of people are likely to be in town or just coming back from town, so it's not a great date for people to come in and testify about this. I myself didn't even hear about the hearing, except that my counselor sends out a newsletter. Mr. Mayor, you're normally very helpful from the mayor's desk email, didn't mention anything about it. So I don't feel that there's been enough information about a very important vote that could allow for a great deal of gaming for the public to have enough of a say. So I think this ought to be postponed until the public can have more of a say, more people could be here to have a say in this. I think it's much too important. I noticed that one of the not a provision, but one of the statements was that whoever, I don't know, the city planner, that said they estimated that this gaming wouldn't have any effect on residential neighborhoods. But the high school? I mean, that's right next to a residential neighborhood. I think there are some properties that were mentioned on Pleasant Street that are adjacent to residential neighborhoods. I'm thinking about traffic. I'm thinking about disruption. People get drunk at a gaming facility. The police are on record as having concerns about the place up on the Heights with crime and traffic and disruption. Now, maybe in a small charitable event, you don't get very much of that, but parking and traffic, potentially many days a year, I think that there's more going on here that needs to be examined, and more people need to weigh in on this. So I have a lot of concerns. I don't think enough people have weighed in on this. The public hasn't had enough chance to comment, and I'd like to see more.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Winnett? Thank you very much. Mr. Cronin, welcome. Please identify yourself.
My name is John Cronin. I'm an attorney from Manchester. As some of you know, I was involved in the Break Day project, and I respect your right to zone and to amend zoning ordinances. I've followed this since the inception. I think, from my view, that it's narrow. You have an exclusionary ordinance, which basically says you can't do something unless it's permitted. We all know that unpopular uses for many, pornography, for example, you have to have a place for them to be and to operate, not as an accessory use, but as a principal use. I think by limiting this to conditional uses, you run into some dangerous territory. Secondly, in terms of its interim nature, I read the documents to say that this was temporary to give ample time to study the issue, to take a look at the master plan, and to do some other things relative to how this may impact the town. But there's no sunset date. Good zoning, good legislation, when it's tied to interim, where it's a restriction on property rights, is usually tied to a sunset date, whatever that is that you deem to be reasonable. For the folks that are anti-gambling or charitable gaming, I respect their opinion. Charitable gaming in this state generates millions of dollars for schools and for local charities. Many of them rely on it. Someone can't just open a shop if they have a store down, open a casino, as one of the, I think, gentlemen was concerned about. It's regulated and licensed by the state. Someone has to go and be vetted and permitted, and it's not an easy process. Also, looking at the zones that are here, I think on its face of your amendment, it does provide areas as conditional use, but as applied, I think people will have comfort that it'll be very difficult for anyone to establish a gaming facility as this ordinance is to be amended. The days of churches and Little League and soccer groups running casino nights are long gone. It's too expensive, there's too much liability, too difficult to staff and train people. I think every casino or charitable gaming facility in this state is run by an operator and licenses it to charities. They no longer staff it. So when you look at this as it's drafted currently, I think it effectively put a great restriction on people to have casinos. For our case, as Mr. Thompson said, it was filed before and approved before, so it's vested and it's working its way through the courts, and that will probably take longer than anyone expects. So those are my few talking points. But if you go forward with it, I'd ask you to consider it allowing a principal use, maybe looking at other zones and putting a sunset date on it. Certainly if that date comes and you don't have your master plan done, I'm from Manchester. We try to amend zoning ordinances and master plans, and it never happens when it's supposed to. It's kind of like Hudson circumferential. So if it comes and sunsets there, you can always extend it. But I think it's good practice to put some type of end date on it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. Any questions for Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
Councilor Keach.
Thank you, Ron. Sir, thank you for your testimony. In your professional opinion, do you think the ordinance as drafted would be ripe for legal challenge?
It's a good question, one that I'm not prepared to answer. I mean, every ordinance, no matter how well it's drafted, and I've drafted some that I thought were very well done, and they're subject to challenge. So there's a lot of different things, as Mr. Thompson and your fine city solicitor's office knows. Drafting is not a science, you know, it's an art, and it's hard to be perfect. So who knows, right? As far as my role in it, I'm satisfied. I have one case. It's moving along in a different forum, but I thought it would be appropriate to come and at least get my comments on the record this evening.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, thank you. I understand you're from Manchester. So are you here pro bono to speak to this?
No, I'm here representing the property owner up at Break a Day.
Follow up?
Follow up.
So you are being paid to be here?
I hope so.
Okay, thank you.
Keep track of your billable hours.
John's smart.
I'm not very good at that.
Yeah.
All set?
All right. Oh, I'm sorry, Council Fantasy.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. I'm not as familiar with the licensing process, but is it, I think my understanding is that the charities get the license and then they need to coordinate with an operator. Is that how it works?
In a macro sense, yes. I mean, being selected, there are a number of charities, right, that all want to begin on this because it provides necessary cash. So there's a process to get vetted to make sure you meet the criteria, not for profit. First, it's supposed to be in the county where it's located. If there's available dates, you can go outside. And they create basically a panel of charities that are qualified. And there's an administrator that does it and say, okay, XYZ Little League, you're going to be up on Tuesday night the 5th, and someone else is going to be on the 6th. So it's not, when I was, you know, running bingo and doing different things, it's a lot different format than it is today. It's much more professional and regulated.
Follow up?
So the provision that we have in there that references the number of days that a licensee, I think, is allowed to operate, is that in the state law tied to a property, or is that just in general?
Well, I heard your question, another good one, and I heard Mr. Thompson's response to it. And I think I interpret that a little bit differently. I think where you were going initially is probably how this ordinance will be interpreted, because there's a preemption issue, right? And that's a whole different deal, and don't listen to me on that. Listen to Attorney Pasek and Attorney Walsh and the others. But the Lottery Commission, I understand, has been in communication. All zoning power vested with the state, right? And it's delegated to cities and towns. And the state says, we want charitable gaming because it's great for us, like the liquor stores. We make a lot of money. It helps with the school budget. It helps with charities that we might otherwise have to fund out of the general fund. So they want it. And right now, the way that it's worded is consistent with the state law. And as I think you suggested, let's say you take 65 days off for the year. You take 300 and divide it by 10. Can you get the 30 charities to do that and have something going for 300 days? You know, I'm not going to give you a legal opinion on that's exactly how it would be read, but I think that's how it can be interpreted. Because to read it any other way, it would conflict with the state law.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Cronin.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify? Item 24F. Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. This moves us to public hearing action. Madam City Clerk.
Item 25 is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 5 Administrative Code, Chapter 30 Administrative Code, Article 30-2 Municipal Departments, Section 30-2-20 Community Development Department.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have discussion? Council Brown.
Yes, and I know the gentleman who came up and asked the question, you felt it was inappropriate, but having attended school board meetings, they are talking like developers. And I'm wondering how the department, how planning will work with the school board.
I believe by statute, planning works with the school board when the school board has a site plan ready. Am I correct? Perhaps you can elucidate.
So what, under state law, the school board is required to come, as is the county, as is state, any governmental agency, come before the planning board with a submittal, and then the planning board will actually review that, actually have a public hearing, staff will review it. So your question about the department, as it would today, it will into the future, undertake a review of that and make recommendations to the planning board. And then the planning board would make recommendations to the school district or the county or whatever, or as we did with the state garage across the street. And then the school district, as a governmental agency separate from the city, will decide whether or not to heed those recommendations and move forward or not. So that doesn't change. That doesn't change at all based on the structure of what's happening with community development today. It would occur exactly the same way because it's laid out under state law to occur that way.
Follow up.
So just for clarification, the city is not weighing in, they're not giving advice to the school board on this?
School board, no.
On the location, on the plans, or anything like that? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. This brings up an interesting conversation. The school district is their own developer, correct? And we would treat them as any other developer, the exception being that they are a governmental agency, and so there is some more flexibility here, but they follow the same process as any other developer. And at this point in time, this is a question to you, Mr. City Manager, they have not asked us for anything concession-wise, it's taxpayers funded for their development. Is that correct?
Well, when you say us,
I
think you're
mean, the
referring to
city
me.
of Concord.
As the person who's the agent for the city, and that's correct. So so what would happen would be, just like any developer, it's a good example, developers have consultants generally on staff or on hire to do things. And they will consult and they will try to find information and come up with a plan or plans. There'll be a traffic plan, there'll be a utility plan, there'll be a site plan of whatnot. And they'll go onto our website, they'll talk to staff and say, what am I required to do? What is here to do? What we find is most governmental agencies, maybe not the federal government, but the county and the state, try to work within the code system that we have and say, oh, and as do we. So when we bring plans in for the community center or the new library that's going to go up in Pennacook, we try to conform to as best we can to the existing regulations and treat ourselves like a developer. And so the same expectation we have is on the school district to do it. Now, it's up to them because they have this blanket immunity, probably not the right term, but they have the ability to say, thank you very much for your thoughts on traffic or utilities, whatever. We're going to go a different direction. And that's up to the community to decide whether or not how they want to handle that. But there's been no requests to say, you know, we realize we need to do X, Y, and Z to conform to your requirements, and we'd like your permission not to. That has not occurred, and nothing's been granted.
Can I have a follow-up? A follow-up question, Mr. City Manager. Has the school district come to you and asked for the city to fund any infrastructure portions of their potential development up at Broken Ground?
And I hope they know the answer to that, which would be, I need to speak to the city council, but my recommendation is no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Fennessy.
I'd like to bring us back to what's actually before us.
Thank you. That would be helpful, Councilor.
And I would like to say that I will be supporting this, both, all three of them, I guess. It's 25, 26, and 27. And I'd like to thank the city manager and the deputy city manager for taking the initiative on this. One of the things that I often hear as criticism is that we are not very user-friendly when it comes to people doing projects in the city, whether it's, you know, a homeowner who wants to have an addition on their house or a developer who wants to come in and build new housing, or someone doing a substantial rehab of an existing building. And I think it's really important to make us as user-friendly as possible when people want to improve their property and hopefully create new housing units if that's their desire as well. So to the extent that this is going to assist with that, I think it's great, and thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you. Any other comments? Let me add that I too, although the current motion is only for item 25, I also strongly support all three of these measures. And I agree. I've said many times that we in the city are really in the public service business and customer service. And I think this, as Council Fennessy has mentioned, will significantly enhance customer service for development projects. I also feel I should compliment the city manager and his staff on their initiative in bringing this before us, and going through all the work, looking at ways that we can create these efficiencies, and putting this package together and before us. So thank you for that. Now put it to the vote. All those in favor of approving item number 25 as proposed or as moved, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion passes. Madam Clerk, item 26.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V, Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Schedule D of Article 35-2, Class Specification Index.
Thank you. Do I have a
Move
motion?
approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. None? I'll move the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item number 27.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 28 Zoning Ordinance.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Very well. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion passes. Madam City Clerk, item number 28.
It is a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $25,000, appropriating the sum of $25,000, to conduct a planning and feasibility study concerning a potential new shared facility for 603 Legal Aid, the Disability Rights Center, New Hampshire, and New Hampshire Legal Assistance, and accepting the sum of $25,000 in community development block grant funds for this purpose.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilor Keach and then Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will vote in support of this resolution, but I do want to say that I have a lot of concern about what's going on with what I'll call the capitalization of our commercial property. And increasingly, vacancies are high in the downtown area. And I think it's really going to become noticeable when the reevaluation occurs and people understand that suddenly residential property is valued much higher than commercial property, and there's going to be a massive shift, and it's going to surprise a lot of people. But this is an example of why that's happening, because commercial vacancies are high and the values are going down. So these are all great organizations. I don't mean to disparage any of them, but the amount of nonprofit property we have in the city is a problem, and I don't know how to address that correctly, but it's an issue that I think we need to be aware of.
Thank you. Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. I will be supporting this. I think these are three organizations that do a lot of work. I know Mr. Schweiker raised the issue about the need to help housing. New Hampshire Legal Assistance and 603 Legal Aid, one of the things they do is help people who are struggling with housing, representing people in landlord-tenant disputes or other housing issues. So I think they actually play a very vital role, not only in our community, but other communities around the state. So I do think it's very important to support this application. I hear the concern about nonprofits. I think they do play a vital role within our community. Each of these organizations employ people who live and work in our city. And while I have some of the same concerns you have, which I've voiced many times about our need to focus on increasing the portion of our property tax revenue coming from commercial real estate, I actually think by supporting this, you perhaps create additional vacancy in commercial property that can then be reutilized in a fashion that's going to grow our tax base. So from my perspective, this makes a lot of sense to support, and I hope you'll join me in supporting it.
Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you. I'll also be supporting this motion. For a long time in the city of Concord, we've looked at a family justice center, and now we have a community justice center. And I think that when we look at the most vulnerable populations within our community, we are looking at people that need to go from one resource to another resource to another resource to another resource to another resource. And it could be up to 30 different county-wide organizations in order to get the appropriate support for the individual facing whatever challenge it might be. Combining these three legal-focused organizations takes away one really significant barrier for somebody that has some significant challenges, and I think that it moves us in the right direction for providing good, logical support for people that, again, are the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Brown.
Yes, would it be possible to ask how much of their work serves the Concord public? Is that something that we can ask them? Is there a report that they could do? I mean, you know, not contingent on this. I support this, but I just think it would be interesting to see how much of their business is serving the local population.
I think that if I may respond to that, I think that would be an interesting piece of information to have. I don't know that it's worth holding up.
Oh, I don't. I'm sorry. I'm not planning. I'm not making it contingent. I don't intend to hold it up. But if we could ask them to submit that at some point.
Sure.
That
I'm sure
would
we
be,
can.
Yeah. That, as you said, that would be an interesting piece of information.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Councilor Fennessy said. I support those comments, and also would just point out that the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire also helps secure housing for some of our vulnerable population who struggles with even greater restrictions around available housing. And as we as a city look at homelessness, which we all know is ever present in our minds, we've heard our mayor say, and I think we know this to be true, the greatest way to combat homelessness is to keep people in homes. So supporting organizations locally that help individuals to find housing and remain in housing when barriers arise, to me is a good use of city space, though I also hope we can figure out how to work with them perhaps in the future should it become an issue for payment in lieu of taxes, at which point knowing what portion of the Concord population they serve could be an interesting piece of information in that negotiation.
Indeed. Any other comments? Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also going to be supporting this, and I think it's part of the service of being the state capital that we have. And also, I noticed that the Chamber of Commerce in Concord does have a number of memberships from nonprofits, and that really spoke to me when I realized that it is an economic benefit to us as the capital. And I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I want to second what Councilor Fennessy said. I think nobody can put it in a better words, as he said. I work with some of these, two of them, these great organizations that are striving to really support underserved communities, but also talking about discrimination or people that cannot afford legal assistance or legal expenses can go through them. Sonia, who used to run the 603 Legal Aid, unfortunately she left, but these organizations are amazing organizations that I will be supporting today here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would like to say that, excuse me, I too will be voting in favor of this. As I said during the public hearing portion, these are three fine nonprofits that do important work. And as someone who resigned from the boards of 4 nonprofits to take this seat, I appreciate sincerely the contribution that our nonprofits make to our community, both in terms of the services that they provide, the employment that they provide, and the richness that they add to our community. I do, on the other hand, as Councilor Keats said, also have an eye towards trying to protect the individual property taxpayer, the homeowner, and as has been said many times, we have the highest percentage of property that is untaxed because it's owned by nonprofits or the state of any community, any municipality in the state. So just trying to keep an eye towards that. That having been said, I'll place this to the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented to adopt item number 28, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
You
no?
got my eye earlier.
You can't vote twice.
That's right. The motion
You will know why
passes.
I'm pushing this. Because
The motion passes. Madam City Clerk, item 29.
It's a resolution adopting an anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support the Community Justice Center site analysis of potential buildings and/or land for development and acquire preliminary architectural and engineering designs and cost estimates.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Before we open discussion, let me just say, add that, since I was slightly distracted, that the previous resolution did pass by the required 2/3 majority. Is there any discussion on item 29, resolution 29? Seeing none, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item number 30.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title IV Zoning Code, Chapter 28, Article 28-2-4, allowable principal and accessory uses in zoning districts, and Article 28-5, supplemental standards and glossary.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. My suggestion is that we actually table this. I'm sympathetic to the issue that was raised by Mr. Wynant. I don't think we've gotten sufficient input from the public. I know we set this for a July hearing back in February, but I don't think we've had adequate input as to the potential implications of what we are looking at potentially doing. And I have some concerns, as came out in some of my questioning, around whether or not this proposal as written is going to actually have an impact on the ability of, I'll call them operators, to run a similar charitable gaming establishment as the Concord Casino, where you have a restaurant and then the accessory use is the charitable gaming facility. I'm not comfortable that as written, this is going to do what I think the intent of the planning board was. Maybe I can get more comfortable with some additional time and some additional input, but I'm not comfortable at this point with what we have before us.
Councilor Schultz.
dumb and embarrassing question. When the planning board discussed this, did it have a public hearing?
It did. Yes. No one testified.
Interesting, thank you.
Councilor Kurtz.
Speaking of dumb and embarrassing, I feel sufficiently confused by the questions that came from public testimony and this sort of back and forth about the ordinance and its relationship to the state law, that I share questions about what this actually would mean in practice, and feel concerned. I feel confused enough to not be comfortable at this moment. If there's more information or other people can speak to some of those questions, I might be shifted, but it does not seem clear to me if we're talking about 10 events per year per location per every possible restaurant in Concord, then I don't think that this affects it does not achieve what was intended when we discussed this earlier. And if in passing something that does not achieve the desired intent and opens the city to a legal battle, I don't feel confident.
Could I ask the city solicitor to come up and answer a question?
Thank you.
Or two? Well, if you want to invite him up, all right.
Oh, look at that. Thank you, Tim.
Voila. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us, and you as well, Mr. Thompson.
Sure.
So, could a restaurant under this ordinance have charitable game, a commercial restaurant?
They would, so the answer is yes. They would have to be licensed as an operator, correct?
Correct.
By the commission, but they could, and under the license they could, or under the ordinance, they could operate 10 times per year.
A for-profit restaurant?
Correct, yes.
Mr. Thompson?
One piece of information that I probably neglected in my background that I think I explained better in February than I did here tonight. Currently, we define and allow charitable gaming under commercial recreation. That is allowed in 6 different zoning districts. And to date, anybody who's wanted to do so could have done so, gone for the license, applied for principal use in those 6 different zoning districts. What we're doing here is limiting those particular uses to accessory to existing uses in 5 zoning districts. So we've actually reduced the potential for additional large-scale facilities in the city of Concord.
I would note that there are a lot of requirements if you want to operate a facility, if it's not owned by a charitable organization. For example, the restaurant, they're going to have surveillance requirements. There's a lot that goes into it. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to have 10 games a night. So it's not as though every restaurant is likely to be, opening its doors for gaming, because there are a lot of restrictions and regulations that they would have to comply with.
Council Fennessy.
I got the side eye on that one. So, is it all right if I ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Thompson?
Sure, I don't remember it, but yes.
Are there any other principal or accessory uses that are permitted that we limit the duration?
I did look at that, actually. When you asked that question, I was scrolling through the ordinance, and I did not find any, at least in the supplemental standards. There are, for example, home occupations. We have limitations, for example, for minor home occupation, 12 trips per day. So we do have limitations, but not in terms of the number of days that you can operate at a particular location.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do you think it would be wise to add a sunset date, even if it was something that potentially might get missed in our master plan that we would have to extend?
I've been on both sides of that idea of using sunset dates in zoning. I've worked in communities that have done both. I have found in my experience that the sunset date typically doesn't mean much because it's either going to get extended or the ordinance is going to be revised one way or the other.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. So if we were to table this motion, or if we were to table this right now, because of the date, because for folks to get more clarification, if somebody was going through the process of doing charitable gaming, do we fall back on this? Do we revert to what's existing or the more restrictive tabled motion?
The way New Hampshire state law works for posted zoning ordinances, because the ordinance has been posted, that ordinance language is in effect until the decision is made by the governing body to either reject or approve that change. So as we exist today, we're operating under the proposed ordinance requirements.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
So can I take a step way back? And so is the goal, this, and if you know the answer to this question, then this should be easy to decide whether to do it tonight or to delay. Is the goal to allow the charitable gaming that has gone on in the community for the last 100 years to continue to go on, and to exclude, as best you can, casinos from opening in the community? To me, I thought that was the goal. That's the goal. That's what this ordinance does. Now, if you want to restrict charitable gaming more than you already are, it's gone on for the last 100 years, then you want to do something different. Then you want to hold back and start whittling down the number of places where it can go according to zone, not by property, but by zone. And of course you can do that. So, but until the two casinos, let's call them the two casinos, came to town, I don't think we've had anybody come to the city council and say, we have a real problem with charitable gaming in our neighborhood. And we've had different issues about traffic and some activity that goes on, but generally what happens is the folks who are running that poker night at so-and-so place at the Elks Club or at the Foreign Legion, or whatever it's going to be, they work it out with their neighbors and it works. There isn't a problem. So if that isn't the issue, then what is the issue? And I thought the issue was no casinos. We don't want to be in Manchester. We don't want to be Nashua. We don't want to be wherever else they are. They don't have them in Bedford, I don't think, right? They don't have them in Bedford. They don't need them in Bedford.
Don't need money.
So we don't want to be that. So now the question comes, if you could exclude the casinos from occurring, other than things that are already grandfathered, do you want to start chipping away at charitable gaming? And if the answer is yes, then hold tight, because we'll have to go back and revisit that. If the answer is no, it's worked for the last many, many, many decades, and we know it benefits Christ the King Church's food pantry. We know it benefits the American Legion up in Pennacook and all those other places that just barely survive on that $30,000 they may get from this, and this is the margin between them going out of business and staying in business. If we want to start chipping away at that, you can see where I'm going with this, then hold back, and we'll start chipping away at that.
Councilor Curtis.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much. So if I may speak as an average human, which I in fact am, I think the conversation around the zones in the city where it could be allowed and the number of days created in me, and perhaps in other members of the public, an anxiety around or a sense that we might be opening the floodgate to something which was previously prevented. And what you've clarified in this conversation through your specifics is that we're not inviting or creating or easing something that has been restricted. We're in fact restricting it further. So there's no reason to think that this conversation would create, this increase. It would be difficult for some entity to get a gaming license. Could they do it and have a workaround? Absolutely. That is always the case. But it does seem to me that it has the intended effect, because in February I spoke to supporting opportunities for limited charitable gaming for the nonprofits, some of which we were just speaking about, and the great value they bring to the city, and that really the goal is to prevent an influx of, you know, large casino-type establishments in our small city. So I appreciate the time you all took in helping me to understand more clearly.
Thank you. Follow up?
So, but building on that, you
Yes.
may find that there, you know, maybe all of a sudden the world changes and you do have more of these activities being requested and more of them coming in. Nothing that says you can't take this, an ordinance that you've just changed and change it again. And squeeze that down to what you want it to be, or widen it up to where you want it to be. You may find that there's certain zones that allowed under this proposal that you're saying, well, we don't want it in downtown, but we're okay with it being in an industrial park. Because who's out in an industrial park at 9 o'clock at night, other than it's generally vacant and there's plenty of parking and whatnot. So that's the thing with zoning. You can continue to change it as time goes on, but Mr. Thompson's right. What you have in place right now that's advertised is the rule, is the law of the land. And it will be the law of the land until you decide to either pass it or not pass it. If you don't pass it, then it just goes back to what we already have in place, which is more casinos can come into town.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown, is your hand up?
Yes. I am interested in tabling this, but not because, not just to look at it, but to afford the public an opportunity, a greater opportunity to look at it as it has been discussed, because we're discussing it now, so more people may be paying attention. It's not that I believe it should be even more restricted or that there's anything wrong with it. I do think that we should afford the public a greater opportunity. So I would like to make a motion to table it for 1 month.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Can I offer a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Maybe 2 months, so we can get it to September. I figure more people are going to show up than in August.
I don't know what's happening in September, but I'm comfortable with September.
Councilor Kerr, Councilor Schultz?
I assume that doesn't supersede, or maybe it does, the motions that I don't want to withdraw my second, so
Motion to table takes precedence.
thank you. Okay.
Okay, any discussion? Councilor Grady-Sexton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will be recusing myself as I work for a charitable organization that could potentially benefit from charity gaming.
Okay. Councilor Fennessy?
I'll just speak briefly. My primary concern is that as drafted, it's not going to provide the result that we want, because I don't think you can, zoning, the whole point of zoning is you are regulating the use of a property. By trying to tie the permitted use to a duration of days, I think is problematic. You either get to do something with your property or you don't get to do something with your property. You don't get to do something with your property for 345 days and not get to do it for 20 days.
Councilor Schultz?
I'll just add that if this were any ordinance or any zoning law, maybe, but we also have that added impact of the charitable gaming laws and the process you need to go through to get a license to do this. That is a bigger hoop to jump through, if I understand it correctly. And I'm eager personally to see, you know, Break a Day Drive is in Ward 9. I never heard from anyone in that ward that wanted it. There seemed to me to be an overwhelming desire not to have it. My fear would be, if we put this off, does this leave it open? Or would we be able to stop proliferation of gambling at some level beyond what we, I think, probably want it to be? And I am eager to see that be fixed sooner rather than later, so I will be opposing the motion.
Mr. Thompson?
Just in regard to the issue of time restraints in zoning ordinance, that actually is fairly common, specifically with temporary signage. There are specific dates and durations that you have for signage that are currently zoning standards, so the use of a duration in a zoning ordinance is not unusual.
Counselor?
Disagree.
Counselor Todd?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Councilor Schultz's comments, and I think that and as we heard in testimony tonight, and I believe it was Mr. Schweiker who reminded us that on several occasions when we put to a vote expanding Keno, this community voted against it. And so I think that we have kind of a track record already of public speaking saying that they don't really want to see expanded gambling, at least in the way that the city manager has described it in terms of why we've come about creating this policy. I think that what I like about what Mr. Thompson has done in creating this is he has left the door open for charitable institutions to be able to continue to raise funds for the nonprofits. And I think that that is an important element, and I was concerned about limiting that too much. And I think that increasing that number to 10, I think, gives a lot more wiggle room. As the city manager pointed out, we may see more of that, we may not, but we could take action at that point. I really agree that I think that the primary purpose of this, the thrust of this, is to go what I view with the public's wishes that's been expressed for many years, and to limit the expanse of gambling through casino operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kretovic?
Thank you, Your Honor. I also will be voting against tabling this item. I think that, as was previously said, our nonprofit organizations in our city, they rely on this. And we're not talking big organizations. We're talking Little League. You know, these are the grassroots efforts that really are being funded most of the time on the backs of parents. And sometimes the rental of the fields, the uniforms, and all of the other things add up. The charitable gaming, what they take from that at any facility for this charitable gaming is about 35%. That 35% makes or breaks these little nonprofit organizations. I don't think delaying this is going to help us add clarity, but I think what it is going to do is help our nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Brown?
Yes, just a clarification for Councilor Schultz. So this doesn't allow proliferation if we delay it, because as it's written, because it has been posted, this is the ordinance. It would change, it could change for the, it could be stronger or weaker after we bring it back. My interest in tabling it was to allow more folks to learn about it, just because it is July 8th. Some folks may be away, they may not have been following and paying attention. So it is purely in the interest of allowing the public more of an opportunity to talk about it and learn about it. And I'm comfortable with a 2-month delay. I don't know if that helped.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? I will say that I will be voting against the motion to table with respect. I feel, as has already been mentioned, this was posted for public hearing back in February, and it has gone through the process at the planning board, also having a public hearing, and I think that the time to act is now. When I was campaigning, besides property taxes, the next thing people complained about were casinos, and the fact that we have casinos in the city. And while this doesn't shut the door on the existing casinos, as Mr. Cronin noted, nor does it particularly shut the door on the Break-A-Day Drive proposal, this does prevent a proliferation of casinos in other parts of the city. And I think this is a sound measure to move forward. In regards to some of the public testimony we heard, I think this ordinance will actually do what is desired, which is to keep us from having a casino on every street corner, which it may sound far-fetched, but it would not be out of possibility. Again, I will be voting against the motion to table. And I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favor of the motion to table as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
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 Those have it. We'll now go to the original motion, which was to adopt the resolution as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Thank you for that robust discussion. Thank you to staff. That now brings us to comments and requests. We don't have any reports, we don't have any new business, and we're not taking up unfinished business. Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple of things. In the council consent agenda, there was a report about diminutive gifts for the Concord Library. And in that, you would have seen a number of items that were donations on behalf of Janet Guerin. Janet Guerin was a longtime resident of the city. What you don't see in the report is her gift also to Beaver Meadow Golf Course as a special revenue fund. We don't need to report diminutive gifts. She had actually already paid her membership for the year, and the family chose to have her membership changed over to our Legacy Tree Program to help replace the trees at Beaver Meadow that we've had to cut for the past several years. Janet was a longtime member at Beaver Meadow, the Women's Golf Association there. She played on both of the Women's League. Her family was very busy in the community, I guess is the way to put it, and she will be greatly missed, but we are very thankful for the contributions in her name. I do also have other Beaver Meadow news. I know it's a shock. The New Hampshire Golf Association, they had their junior championship, and you are not going to believe this, but Beaver Meadow, our juniors knocked it out of the park, like seriously. Maddie Savory won the girls division. I'm sorry, I know your niece was not present for the tournament this year. Mr. Fennessy's niece is #1 in the state, and Maddie sits around 2, 3, or 4, but she won the championship this year. And also Andrew Superint took home the boys junior championship for the state of New Hampshire, and they are fantastic golfers. It doesn't even come close to what our Josiah Hakala did. Josiah showed up in the National PGA Junior Championship and not only took first place, but had the lowest posting score ever with a -14. The key thing to all of this is that their initial coach on their path was our very own Phil Davis. We're so very proud of him. The fireworks at Memorial Field, the Parks and Recreation Department did a fantastic job. If you go online and you see everybody reposting their videos, they're going to tell you, fantastic job by the City of Concord, so really congratulations to our administration and the Recreation Department. And the last thing is all the rumors about Swenson Granite that have been popping up over the weekend. Swenson Granite does operate the last granite manufacturing facility in the Granite State, right here in Concord, New Hampshire. The organization was sold to Polycor a couple years ago, and it was reported over the weekend that they are closing down the quarry operations. I did speak with the general manager today. That is true. The quarrymen have been laid off, but it does not actually mean that they are going to end their quarry operations. They are doing an advisory look at the facility now. They are going to continue crushing granite up on top of the hill. It is a product that they do resell, and I believe that the retail store is open as well. More news to come. I believe other news outlets will be following up that have been in touch with Swenson Granite. 140 years in the city of Concord, multiple granite facilities all across the state have closed over the years. This just happens to be the last one, and it's the one right here on Rattlesnake Hill. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
Yes. Oh, just a quick question, and then I have a few things. Councilor Kretovic, are they going to continue blasting, or are they done blasting?
They are not blasting.
That is something to celebrate. I am thrilled with that. Swenson Granite, I know that the residents who live right around the quarry have been complaining about the blasting, so that is great news for everyone who lives on Lake Street. So a few things that I have started a blog where I'm checking out all the sidewalks, because we have this amazing historical city, and if you walk it or bike it, you take in so much more. If you want to, I'm doing a weekly about our sidewalks. It's super fun. My website is Stacy for Concord, STACEY, 4 Concord. The blog is Where the Sidewalk Ends. I'm learning so much more about the city and areas that I've walked that I just didn't pay attention to before. So kudos to the many generations that have contributed to the sidewalks and the social infrastructure of our city. Speaking of social infrastructure and connection, there is a group that's focused on transparency in Concord, and they also have a website where they encourage people to come together to look at and ensure that our government and representatives are being transparent. So you can check out their website, Transparency in Concord. And we can have coffee with our mayor on July 27th at the East Side Market at 9 a.m.
Thank you. I didn't know I was retaining you. We'll see whether you're worth what I'm paying. Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to give a shout out to the city assessors. As a homeowner, I had to have the assessors come to my home to take a look at something, and I know there's been a fair amount of discussion in the community about the upcoming revaluation process. And while I know that we are contracting out, I just wanted to say that having the assessing team come into my home was an entirely painless and, dare I say, pleasant process. So shout out to the staff for coming when I requested it and for making me feel at ease in that process. And they didn't know I was a city councilor at the time, so I was just a regular old homeowner. I just want to shout them out and also encourage residents to not fear when the knock comes on the door. And then also, there are several Pride events happening in Concord over the next 3 weekends. So if you are interested in finding out about those, check social for Capital City Pride and enjoy this beautiful summer month. Thanks.
Councilor Grady-Sexton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to thank the Parks and Rec Department first for finding a way to keep all of our pools open, but also my kiddos love the programming that Parks and Rec puts on during the summer season. I think all parents, many parents have challenges trying to figure out what to do with your kiddos during the summer, but I would just highly recommend their camp programming. They do such a phenomenal job keeping the kids busy and happy, and those programs are always full, so make sure next year you get to those early because they're really worthwhile.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Today is my son's second birthday, so I am celebrating. I'm very blessed, and as I said earlier, I couldn't wait to get out to put him to bed, but it seemed like it's taking longer than expected. So that's why I was like, yes, anyway.
He's waiting for you.
He's waiting for you.
We told him we could stay up late.
Thank you. That's true for tonight, right? And I want to take this opportunity to thank Councilor Kurtz and Mayor Champlain and Councilor Krotovic. I hope I got it right this time, right? Oh, she's gone.
No, she's gone. Not gone.
For really reading during our Frederick Douglass reading. I think that was a great event. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire and the Concord Historical Society for coordinating this very important event. I learned a lot. I was very moved by the reading, and I think it's worth to celebrate. So thank you all.
Thank you. Was it to me? Okay, well. No. Councilor Todd.
Your Honor, yes, thank you. I just wanted to also do a shout out for National Night Out, which is coming up on August 6th, 5 to 8 at Rollins Park. It's a fantastic event. It's for all ages. It's free, and it's actually held across the country. And the purpose is to heighten crime and drug prevention awareness and strengthen neighborhood and community police relationships. But our event is really terrific. I've been to it many times before with my family, and just the vendors are there. You can learn a lot about the city. You can learn a lot about various organizations, and it's a great way to go out and have a lovely evening with some of your friends and neighbors. So hope to see you there. Thank you.
Councilor Floyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going back a couple of weeks, I hadn't been to the market days in a couple of years, and what a great turnout and what a great event, and kudos to all of those who participated and made it such a good event for downtown. On July 24th, the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire will have an open house at 27 Warren Street from 4 to 6 p.m. They have a new director.
They'll be sharing some program updates, and again, many thanks for that organization for everything they do to make Concord a better place for so many people. And then on a personal note, I received a call from a fellow Concord High alum a few weeks ago, and want to acknowledge the team at Bank of New Hampshire on North Main Street. His 92-year-old mother received a scam call identifying a family member who had been in an accident and needed bail money. We've all heard the stories. Well, I'm not going to go into details what the bank did, but the outcome was good, and we should be thankful that we have businesses that that we have in this city. I can tell you in southern New Hampshire, of a community that over the last couple of months, 2 different people lost over $20,000 in these same scams. So we need to really be vigilant and acknowledge and make sure that our senior citizens and our family members are cognizant of what's going on in the world. So kudos to the Bank of New Hampshire on North Main Street. Thank you for being such a good employer. And then there's a lot of heavy hearts in Concord and Boat today relative to Eddie Berkey and the family. I just wanted to say that there's a lot of us in the ice hockey, baseball, golf, et cetera, families that have heavy hearts, and we support you. So thank you.
Councilor Brown?
Yes, just one last thing. I just want us to recognize Parks and Rec for doing the outstanding job of fully staffing our pools. It is a tough job to be a lifeguard. You're on all the time. You're not supposed to, chit-chat with neighbors, residents. You're there to keep them safe. So please, anyone who goes to the pools or knows a lifeguard, please thank them for their service, because, they're in the hot sun and they're doing a great service for our community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kurtz?
I forgot one. I'll
Double
be
dipping.
fast. I know. I'm sorry.
It's coming around the table.
The Friends program has organized a Friends-a-Palooza July 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. in Keach Park in honor of International Friendship Day. It's a 3rd annual party in the park. Games, crafts, dance, face painting, food truck, snacks, free stuff, and lots of local organizations will have tables there, so it's a great opportunity for individuals to go experience the park, socialize, and also learn about some of the organizations providing resources to children and families in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. No more double dippers?
You want me to keep us going? Your Honor, I have something to add. I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Todd. I participated in Pennacook 250th anniversary. It was a beautiful event. Enjoyed the cake and enjoyed the tour. It was beautiful overall. So thank you.
Cake.
Well, I want to say, first of all, I had my thanks to Councilor Grady Sexton for this Parks Department staff, the swing program. My 5-year-old grandson is started today, and it was apparently a great experience, except that my daughter said he wasn't paying attention, and neither were the rest of the 3 to 5-year-olds. So she said it's like herding cats, and she was very complimentary of this. Also, I want to add that the reading of Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave Is Your 4th of July" is available thanks to Concord TV, which is also broadcasting tonight. You can go on their YouTube channel and you can watch that, and I think that it would be worthwhile. And you've said thanks to a number of the people who made it possible, and I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the Black Heritage Trail I appreciate their reaching out to me and broaching the idea and the way that it could come together as a collective endeavor. I do want to add to Councilor Foot's comments. Eddie Berkey's, who I didn't really know, his father and I worked together for 7 years at the State House. And he was a great colleague, a great guy, and this is the kind of tragedy that no family ever wants to deal with. And so they've been in my prayers ever since I heard the word on Wednesday, rather on Thursday, that this had taken place. I also want to commiserate with the granite cutters up at Swenson Granite who have lost their jobs. That is a tragic byproduct of this decision, And I'm hoping that those who live in Concord, those who live outside of Concord, can get back up on their feet again. I hope that they had a generous severance package. When I was working in the corporate sector, I would say that you're always only one new executive's bright idea away from being out of a job, and this is one example of that, you know. And so I commiserate with them, and I hope they can get back on their feet. And that ends my remarks, and that ends the meeting, unless the city manager has his remarks.
Thank you for the review, and thank you for, look forward to working with you over the next year.
Thank you. That is mutual.
Thank
you.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Wow, I didn't even have to prompt you.
He was ready, he's been ready for
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
7:05.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you. Great meeting.